The first thing my son said after my accident wasn't, "Are you alive?" or, "Do you need anything?" He stood at the foot of the hospital bed, arms folded, eyes already somewhere else, and said, "I can't keep dropping everything like this, Dad." I remember staring at the ceiling tiles while the words settled. My left leg was wrapped in so much white it looked borrowed. The nurse had just left. The room still smelled like antiseptic and metal. I had been hit by a delivery truck crossing the street near my house. No drama. Just bad timing and a driver looking at his phone. Broken hip. Months of recovery, they said. Maybe longer at my age. I looked at my son and waited for something softer to follow. It didn't come. "I've got meetings," he went on. "Kids. Responsibilities. You know how it is." I did know how it was. I had lived that life once. I just hadn't expected to hear it framed like a resignation. "I'm not asking you to stay," I said. My voice sounded thin, even to me. "I just thought you'd want to know what the doctor said." He checked his watch. "Didn't sit down. They'll tell you. You're in good hands here." Then he added the part that still wakes me up some nights. "We should probably talk about next steps. Long term." That was when I understood something had already shifted. The accident hadn't just broken my hip. It had tipped the balance between us, and he knew it. 2 days later, he stopped answering my calls. Not all at once. Just enough to make a pattern. Straight to voicemail. Texts left on read. When he did show up again, it was with pamphlets. Assisted living. Care facilities. Words like manageable and efficient. "I can't have you living alone anymore," he said, standing in my kitchen like a guest who planned to rearrange the furniture. "This isn't safe." I looked around the room. The same table where I paid bills for 40 years. The same window where his mother used to stand, waiting for him to come home from school. Nothing about it felt unsafe to me. "What I can't have," I said slowly, "is being talked about like I'm already gone." He sighed. That sound people make when they think patience is generosity. "Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be." After that, the help dried up. Groceries missed. Appointments forgotten. A casual mention that maybe selling the house would make things easier for everyone. For him, mostly. He didn't say that part out loud, but I heard it anyway. I spent a lot of nights alone in that first week after getting home. The walker beside my bed. Pain ticking through my leg like a metronome. The phone silent on the table. I kept thinking he'd call and say he was sorry. That he'd been scared. That he hadn't meant it. He didn't. Instead, an email arrived one morning, carefully worded, polite, with links and deadlines. He'd spoken to someone. He thought it was best if we moved quickly. He signed it with his full name, like a lawyer. That was the moment I stopped waiting for him to come back as my son and started asking myself what I needed to do to survive what he'd already decided. I wasn't angry yet. I was something quieter than that. I was hurt, and I was thinking, and I knew whatever came next would change the rest of my life. The pressure didn't come all at once. It came in small, reasonable pieces, the kind that sound sensible until you put them together and realize you're being boxed in. My son started showing up again, but only during business hours. He'd stand in the doorway with his phone buzzing in his hand, talking about work while glancing at the walker, the pills lined up on the counter, the way I moved more slowly now. Every visit ended the same way. "This isn't sustainable, Dad." He said it gently, like he was doing me a favor. He brought a woman with him one afternoon. "A case manager," he said. She smiled too much and spoke directly to him, not to me, as if I were furniture with an opinion that didn't matter. They talked about liability. About risk. About how accidents like mine were red flags. I sat there listening to my own life being summarized in bullet points. When I tried to speak, my son cut in. He's stubborn. Always has been. But he means well. That was new. I had become a trait, not a man. A week later, he brought paperwork. Power of attorney. Medical directives. He said it was, just in case, but he slid the pages toward me with a pen already uncapped. I noticed his name printed neatly where mine used to be. "You don't trust me?" he asked when I hesitated. I looked at his face and realized how strange it was that trust had become something I owed him, not the other way around. "I need time," I said. He didn't like that. His jaw tightened, the way it used to when he was a teenager being told no. Time is exactly what you don't have much of anymore. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it click with every turn. Pain flared when I shifted. Fear crept in when I stayed still. I thought about how easily a signature could erase a lifetime of choices. How quickly independence becomes inconvenience in someone else's hands. The next morning, I found out he'd already called a facility. Put my name on a waiting list. He said it casually over the phone, like he'd scheduled a dentist appointment. "I was just being proactive," he said. "You'll thank me later." That was the first time I felt something hard settle in my chest. Not rage. Not panic. Resolve. I realized then that my son wasn't acting out of concern anymore. He was acting out of control. The accident had given him an opening, and he was stepping through it carefully, legally, with a smile. I didn't tell him what I was thinking. I thanked him for checking in. I told him I was tired. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, my leg aching, my coffee going cold. I understood something very clearly in that quiet. If I didn't protect myself now, there would come a day when I wouldn't be allowed to speak at all. I didn't tell my son what I did next. I learned long ago that the loudest moves are rarely the strongest ones. 2 mornings after he brought the paperwork, I called a lawyer. Not someone flashy. A man whose office sat above a hardware store downtown, with a brass nameplate and stairs that creaked the way old things should. He spoke slowly and listened without interrupting, which already put him ahead of most people in my life at that point. He didn't sound surprised by anything I told him. "This happens more than you'd think," he said. "An injury changes the math for some families." He explained things carefully. What power of attorney really meant. How easily it could be used, temporarily, and then never given back. How selling a house could happen faster than you imagine once the right signatures were in place. "What do you want?" he asked me. I had to think about that. Not about my son. Not about punishment or pride. Just about myself. "I want to stay a person," I said finally. "As long as I'm breathing." He nodded. "Then we act while you're clearly capable." We spent an hour going through documents. Updating things I hadn't touched since my wife was alive. Making sure decisions stayed with me unless I said otherwise. Putting very clear language around my home, my accounts, my care. When I left his office, my leg was throbbing and my hands were shaking, but my mind felt steady in a way it hadn't since the accident. That afternoon, my son called. His tone was different. Sharper. "I got a message from the facility," he said. "They said you're not moving forward." "I didn't agree to it," I replied. A pause. Then a laugh that wasn't warm. "Dad, you're being difficult." "I'm being careful." "You're scared," he said. "And I get that. But you're not thinking clearly." I thought about the lawyer's office. The smell of dust and paper. The way my name still meant something on a page. "I'm thinking very clearly," I said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "If you won't cooperate, I can't keep helping the way I have been." There it was. The line drawn cleanly across the floor. "I understand," I said. After we hung up, I sat by the window and watched a squirrel dig at the edge of the lawn, stubborn and focused. The house was quiet. Pain hummed through my leg, steady and dull. I felt afraid. Of course I did. But underneath that fear was something solid. For the first time since the accident, the next move was mine. The help stopped quietly, the way a faucet does when someone thinks you won't notice right away. The first thing was groceries. He used to bring them every Sunday without being asked. After our last call, Sunday came and went. Then the next. I learned how to balance on one leg a little longer, how to lean on the cart at the store without letting anyone rush me. Pride can carry you farther than people think, but it costs something every mile. Then there were the appointments. Physical therapy was moved, then forgotten. When I reminded him, he said, "I thought you were arranging that now." It was said kindly, but it landed heavy. I realized he wasn't confused. He was withdrawing. A week later, he sent another email. This one was shorter. No links. Just a statement. "I can't be responsible for your expenses if you won't follow a plan." I read it twice. Then a third time. He wasn't offering help anymore. He was setting terms. That night, the pain was bad enough that sleep wouldn't come. I lay there listening to the refrigerator hum, thinking about all the small ways money moves through a life. Utility bills. Insurance premiums. Property taxes. Things you don't notice until someone decides their leverage. 2 days later, he showed up unannounced. He walked through the house slowly, like an inspector. Not rude. Just distant. He pointed out the loose rug by the hallway. The step down into the den. The tub without grab bars. "This place isn't safe," he said. "If you fall again, that's it." I didn't argue. I asked him to sit. He didn't. "I've talked to someone," he continued. "There's a facility with an opening. Temporary. Just until you're back on your feet." "I'm already back on my feet," I said. "They're just slower." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "Dad, this isn't about speed. It's about reality." "What reality?" I asked. "The one where I can't keep carrying this," he said. "Emotionally. Financially." There it was again. Carrying. As if I were a burden he'd just noticed. "I didn't ask you to carry me," I said quietly. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I saw something flicker. Guilt, maybe. Or frustration that guilt hadn't worked. "If you don't agree to the move," he said, "I'll have to step back completely." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I understood. After he left, the house felt larger than it ever had. Every sound echoed. Every corner reminded me that independence isn't something you lose all at once. It's chipped away, decision by decision, until one day you're asked to sign off on your own disappearance. I made a cup of tea and sat at the table, hands wrapped around the mug, and accepted a hard truth. My son believed he was in charge now, and he was prepared to let me suffer until I accepted it. I didn't confront him after that. I let the silence do its work. Days passed. Then weeks. My leg grew stronger inch by inch. I learned the rhythm of pain again, how to move through it instead of fighting it. Mornings were the hardest. Nights were long. But the house stayed mine, and that mattered more than comfort. The lawyer called to tell me the documents were finalized. Everything was in order. My decision stayed with me unless a doctor declared otherwise, and even then, the process wouldn't be quick or quiet. I thanked him and hung up, feeling older and steadier at the same time. My son noticed the change before I said a word. He started calling again. Short calls. Casual ones. Asking how I was doing. Asking if I'd thought any more about options. The pressure had softened, but it hadn't gone away. It had just learned a new tone. One afternoon, he asked directly, "Did you talk to a lawyer?" I paused before answering. Not to hide anything, but to choose my words. "Yes," I said. There it was. The sharp intake of breath. "About what?" "About staying in my own life," I replied. He was quiet longer than usual. Then he said, "You didn't tell me." I wasn't asking permission. His voice cooled. "You know this complicates things." "For who?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. When he did, it was careful. "For planning. For responsibility." I almost laughed. Almost. A few days later, a letter arrived from his address. Not handwritten. Typed. Formal. He was concerned about my capacity, it said. About my safety. He suggested an evaluation. Nothing hostile. Just, official. I folded the letter and set it down. My hands didn't shake this time. I called the lawyer again and read it to him word for word. He sighed, not surprised. "This is the escalation," he said. "Not uncommon." "What do I do?" I asked. "You keep doing what you're doing," he replied. "And you document everything." That night, I sat at my desk and wrote down dates. Conversations. Missed visits. Emails. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. I wasn't building a case against my son. I was building a record of myself. The next time he came over, he didn't mention the letter. He looked around again, noted the grab bars I'd installed, the cleared walkways, the calendar on the fridge filled with appointments I'd arranged myself. "You've been busy," he said. "I've been living," I answered. He frowned. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I met his eyes. "No. I'm making it honest." For the first time since the accident, he looked unsure. Not worried about me. Worried about losing ground. And I knew then that the hardest part wasn't behind us yet, but I also knew something else just as clearly. I wasn't going to disappear quietly for anyone. The evaluation came faster than I expected. A letter arrived scheduling it for the following Tuesday, signed by a clinic I'd never contacted. My son had arranged it, careful to stay within the lines. No accusations. Just concern. Just procedure. The kind of thing that sounds harmless until you realize it can decide where you're allowed to live. I didn't call him. I called my lawyer. "He's trying to establish a pattern," the lawyer said. "If you refuse, he'll say you're uncooperative. If you go, he'll hope they find something." "So I go," I said. "Yes," he replied. "And you bring me the results." The morning of the evaluation, my son offered to drive me. I declined. He looked surprised when I told him I'd already arranged transportation. "You don't have to shut me out," he said. "I'm not," I answered. "I'm showing up on my own." The doctor was polite. Thorough. Asked me the date, the president's name, what medications I took and why. Had me draw a clock. Asked about my finances, my house, my plans. I answered calmly, honestly. I told him about the accident, the recovery, the pressure. He listened. He took notes. At the end, he said, "You're very clear about what you want." "I've had a long time to practice," I told him. The report arrived 3 days later. No impairment. No concerns. Full capacity. I made a copy and mailed it to my son with a short note. "For your records." He didn't call. Not right away. When he finally did, his voice was tight. "This doesn't change the situation." "It changes everything," I said. He tried a different approach after that. Softer. Apologetic. He said he'd been overwhelmed. That he only wanted what was best. That money was tight and stress makes people say things they don't mean. I listened. I didn't argue. When he finished, I said, I believe you're stressed. I don't believe that justifies trying to take my life out of my hands. Silence stretched between us. What do you want from me? He asked. I thought about that carefully. Respect, I said. And distance. He didn't like that answer. A week later, I received notice that he'd removed himself as my emergency contact. I suppose it was meant to hurt. What it did instead was clarify things. I updated the list myself. Neighbors. An old friend from work. People who showed up without keeping score. That night, sitting alone in the quiet house, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the accident. Relief. Not because the conflict was over. It wasn't. But because I had stopped trying to convince my son to see me as a person. I had decided to see myself that way instead. After that, the silence changed shape. It wasn't absence anymore. It was distance with intention behind it. My son stopped calling altogether. No check-ins. No updates. No more talk of plans. I heard from a neighbor that his car had been parked down the block one afternoon, engine running, lights off. He didn't come to the door. Just sat there, then left. I understood that too. Control is harder to maintain from the outside. A month passed. Then another. My leg improved enough that I no longer needed the walker indoors. I cooked simple meals again. Paid my bills at the table by the window. Life settled into a smaller, quieter rhythm. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. Then the letter came. Certified mail. His handwriting on the envelope. Careful. Precise. Inside was a proposal. Not an apology. Not concern. A proposal. He suggested selling the house, while the market was favorable. He'd already spoken to a realtor. Included estimates. Comparables. A breakdown of how the proceeds could be managed responsibly to cover my future care. His future decisions. He didn't say that part, but it was implied in every line. At the bottom, a sentence stood out. This would make things simpler for everyone. I folded the letter and sat with it for a long time. I thought about the house. The creak of the stairs. The tree out back I planted the year he was born. How easy it would be to give in. How tired I still felt some days. I also thought about something the lawyer had said weeks earlier. People don't escalate unless something is at stake. That afternoon, I drove myself to the bank for the first time since the accident. Slow. Careful. When I walked back out to the car, keys warm in my hand, I felt something close to pride. Not the loud kind. The private kind that doesn't need witnesses. I called the lawyer again. We reviewed my finances. My will. My beneficiaries. Not to punish anyone. To make things clear. To remove ambiguity. To make sure no one could mistake silence for consent again. When I was done, I mailed my son a short reply. I am not selling my home. I am not moving. Please do not make plans on my behalf again. No explanations. No emotion. Just boundaries. He didn't respond right away. When he finally did, it was one sentence. You're choosing this the hard way. I read it once, then deleted it. Because the truth was, the hard way had already happened. It happened when I lay in a hospital bed and realized my value had become conditional. Everything after that was just me choosing not to disappear. That night, I locked the front door, turned off the lights, and went to bed knowing something important had shifted for good. The last move he made surprised me only because it came wrapped in concern. He showed up early one Saturday morning, standing on the porch with a paper bag in his hand like a peace offering. Coffee. Pastries. Familiar gestures, carefully chosen. I didn't invite him in right away. I let him stand there long enough to remember whose house it was. "I just want to talk," he said. I stepped aside. He walked through the living room slowly, looking at the photos on the wall, the same ones he'd grown up with. He pointed at one of his mother and said softly, "She wouldn't like how this has gone." I felt that land where it was meant to. I didn't answer. We sat at the table. He slid the bag toward me, untouched. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low. "I'm worried about you," he said. "Really worried." "I'm doing fine," I replied. "That's what scares me," he said. "You think you are?" I watched him closely then. Not as a father watching a son, but as a man watching someone negotiate. He talked about isolation. About how stubbornness looks like clarity from the inside. About how people my age don't always see decline until it's too late. "And if something happens," he added, "I'll have to live with knowing I didn't do enough." There it was. The shift from control to guilt. "I've made arrangements," I said calmly. "People know where I am. What I want. You're not responsible for me." He shook his head. "You don't get it. If you won't listen to me, I'll have to involve someone else." I waited. "Adult services," he said. "Just to check in. Make sure everything's okay." He said it like a kindness. Like a warning wrapped in silk. I felt tired then. Not weak. Just tired of explaining my existence. "If you do that," I said, "I won't stop you." He blinked. That wasn't the reaction he expected. "But understand this," I continued. "Every step you take something from me puts another step between us." He stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "You're choosing pride over family." I looked up at him, steady. "No. I'm choosing dignity over fear." He left without touching the coffee. The door closed harder than necessary. 2 weeks later, a woman from Adult Services knocked on my door. She was polite. Thorough. Asked questions. Looked around. Noted the grab bars, the food in the fridge, the calendar on the wall. At the end, she smiled gently and said, "You're doing just fine." I asked her to put that in writing. She did. When the house went quiet again, I sat alone at the table and understood something with painful clarity. My son had already accepted a version of me that didn't include my voice. And I had finally accepted that I could not fix that without losing myself. So I stopped trying. I haven't seen my son since that visit. Weeks passed, then months. No calls. No letters. Just the quiet settling in, the kind that feels heavy at first and then slowly turns into space you can breathe in. I heard through someone else that he'd told people I was confused and pushing everyone away. I didn't correct the story. I knew better than to chase a version of myself someone else needed me to be. My leg healed the rest of the way in time. Not perfectly. It never would. I walk slower now. I plan more carefully. But I wake up in my own bed, in my own house, and that still means something. I made changes after that last visit. Small ones. I simplified things. Paid off what I could. Updated paperwork again, just to be sure. I chose who would speak for me if I ever couldn't, and I chose people who knew how to listen. I didn't remove my son from my life in anger. I simply stopped leaving the door open to be managed. Sometimes I miss him. Of course I do. You don't stop missing your child just because they've hurt you. I miss who he was when he was younger. I missed the sound of his laughter before everything became about efficiency and outcomes. I even missed the version of myself who thought love could fix anything if you gave enough of it. But I don't miss the fear. I don't miss lying awake wondering what signature would be asked of me next. I don't miss being spoken over in my own kitchen. I don't miss shrinking so someone else could feel taller. On quiet mornings, I sit by the window with my coffee and watch the street wake up. People rushing to jobs, children waiting for buses, life moving forward whether you keep up or not. I've learned something in these months that no doctor or lawyer could have taught me. Growing old doesn't mean giving up your voice. It means choosing when to use it, and when to walk away from those who won't hear it. If my son ever comes back ready to see me as I am, not as a problem to solve, I'll listen. I'll always listen. But I won't hand my life over just to keep the peace. The accident took a lot from me. My balance. My speed. Some illusions I held on to longer than I should have. But it also gave me this. The chance to stand still, look at my life honestly, and decide, calmly and without bitterness, that my dignity was worth protecting, even if it meant standing alone. And that, I've learned, is not weakness. That is what it means to finish your life standing in your own name.